Hey everybody, welcome to Porn Free Millennial Podcast. We have a very special guest on today, Vern Tompke. Today's theme is mentorship and how it's key to our recovery journey. So this is a very special day. I've known Vern for a couple of years now. I'm
Hmm.
currently going through one of his courses. I look up to him a lot. He was one of the influential people in my life to get going on this podcast journey and to share my story. So Vern, really excited to have you on. How are you
Uh,
today?
Good. It's great to be on, and I've so enjoyed working with you and getting to know you. And yeah, we're on a trip, man. This has been fun.
It has been fun. So for the audience, Vern is the host of the Finding Traction podcast.
Yep.
He's also a host of Pastors on Porn podcast as well.
Mhm.
And Vern, how about you just tell the audience maybe just a little bit about yourself before we dive into things?
Yeah, boy, I wear lots of hats. First of all, I've been married 37 years, got three kids, two of them are married. When I share a little bit more of my porn story, I'll get into more of the details of my background. But right now, the hats I wear, I'm a high school teacher by training. I was a church planter and pastor. I So right now I'm still doing some substitute teaching. I'm a recovery coach. Uh, Primarily with porn and sexual addictions, partly because that's my own journey. I do some business coaching, which kind of is interesting because that's come out of working with guys around porn.
Hmm.
And then they get all freed up and then they start making business decisions and we talk through that. So lots of hats. I'm not quite sure what hat I wear at any given time. And I also, yeah, so those are a few of the hats. I'm an avid Dallas Cowboy fan, much to don't like the owner, but I like the team. Uh, and I go from disappointment in my sports life, but hopefully my real life is a little more hopeful than my cowboy life.
One day, right?
One
One
day,
day, one day will
hope
happen.
hope springs eternal.
There you go. And Vern, where are you from?
I'm from the west coast of Canada, about an hour and a half from the city of Vancouver, right along the border, a place called Chilliwack,
Chilliwack.
First Nations name. And yeah, so born and raised in Canada. Half my family lives in the States now, so I speak American as well. And but in an election year, I'm the safe Canadian. You know, everyone talks about, I don't know if you ever heard the joke where if you don't want people to ask you about having relationships, you just say you have a Canadian girlfriend. So I'm the Canadian guy when everyone's getting hot and bothered about politics. I'm going, hey, I'm from Canada. So they all have to get me over to their side. So it,
That's
it
great.
help it helps.
You're very Canadian, but then very American with how you follow football.
That's true. Yeah, people go, where did you get that from? And I say, I read a cartoon at 11 years of age, which is really interesting because it's actually not a bad segue. Things
Yeah,
get embedded in our lives in that wet cement, and that 9 to 13 range. So I say I read a comic,
okay.
Tom Landry and the Dallas Cowboys. And that was when for some reason I got hooked at that age. And now I'm okay, 63. So 50 years later, Mac, I'm still an avid cowboy fan from a cartoon I read at 11, 12, 13 years of age. So
Wow.
so it's amazing what happens and why that got imprinted in me. Now something else got imprinted in me, and I don't know if we want to start that journey.
Yeah, we can talk through that. I think to lay out just for the audience when we talk about this imprinting, just like how the podcast is going to go. So Vern's going to talk a little bit about his relationship with porn, how it got imprinted in his life.
Yep.
Then we're going to talk about mentorship. And start, I guess when Vern, you're talking about how it got imprinted your life, we can
Hmm.
weave in
Yeah.
recovery and how you
Yeah.
started recovery,
You betcha.
and then weaving in mentorship and
Yep.
how mentorship was important for you. And then just like advice that you have for the audience that's listening
Hmm.
today. And then we'll kind of end it with anything that comes up, like any kind of
Yeah.
topics that we want to dig into a little bit more. So yeah, with that being said, how was porn imprinted in your life at that early age?
Yeah, and some of this is where a therapist has also helped me in terms of do a bit of archaeology in terms of my story. But I'm a Canadian farm kid, was the fourth of five kids, born, raised on a big cattle farm. And I was kind of sandwiched between two higher needs kids. My older brother had a lot of emotional challenges. He just really struggled in terms of navigating life emotionally. So he required a lot of effort from my mom. My dad was a workaholic. He was kind of out of the picture. So my mom was kind of the one to raise the kids. So my older brother required a lot of attention. And then my younger sister was born crippled with club feet. So she spent the first couple years um, at Shriners Hospital and trips back and forth with all of that. And so if you can envision that, I was kind of the quiet, forgotten, unseen child that,
Got it.
because I didn't have a lot of overt needs, it was like, well, Vern's good to go. He doesn't need a lot, so we can focus on the more needy kids on either side of him. Well, the message I got for that was I was a bit invisible, unseen. And now at the age I wouldn't have been able to communicate those emotional needs of being seen and being valued and important, until you're older, of course.
Sure.
So what happened in that place, I was a bit of a drifting. And so, somewhere in that 10, 11, 12 age, my neighborhood buddies, there's always, introduced me to one of their older brothers' stack of porn magazines.
Got it.
And I had that Velcro in my life, that whatever half of Velcro it was, whether I was the hooks and it was the fuzzies, or that I was the fuzzies and it was the hooks, it really all of a sudden began to give me, it somehow made me feel warm, it made me feel connected,
Mm,
it dealt that sense of feeling alone and adrift and unseen. All of that went away when I was around porn. So before long, I started to, sometimes I actually would break it, go into my neighbor's house when they were gone. There was a couple single guys there. They had a stack of porn magazines. I would take one or two. I would be able to find my own. And so I would begin to develop my own porn world. Now, I
mm.
didn't realize at the time, but my parents were in a bit of a drift, a relational drift. And when I turned 16, they split up. So
Wow.
they
Okay.
they divorced. And so in that process, again, when this is the only life I was like, oh, whatever.
Right.
It didn't, I wouldn't say that it affected me. I didn't break down emotionally, but it just, once again, I felt more isolated, alone, and more attracted to that special secret life, where I felt seen. Again, these are all things as an older person I've started to understand. I wouldn't have been able to talk about this or understand this when I was younger. So that kind of went through now grade 11-ish. So that would be my junior year in high school. That's American speak. We don't speak that way. In my junior year in high school, I had a really significant spiritual awakening at a summer camp. And that began a new porn season of my life. That was the binge and purge porn season. And many of you will identify with that season because you know what it's like. You throw everything away, right?
Right.
I probably addicted wait to a few postal workers because I would throw them in post office boxes that you couldn't get back at, right? And um and so but then I would break down, I would go buy a magazine or two and different sort of material. And at some point the conviction would grow and grow. And then I would say, that's the last time, and I would take my whole stash and throw it away. Binge and purge kind of
Hmm.
thing. So
I remember doing that too. That's very relatable to me.
yeah, and I think many
Yeah.
people, will have struggled with that double life, that torn, that cognitive dissonance, right? So So that took me through, moving into to college years. It would be very much similar, but of course, now that you're on your own, I would start renting VHS movies. I remember slipping into an adult movie theater in I think I lasted about 15 minutes, and then the conviction overwhelmed me, and I fled. You know,
You just full sprint ran like a
exactly.
Dallas Cowboys
Uh,
running back,
yes, exactly.
Emmitt Smith.
All of that kind of stuff. But like a lot of guys, so I was in this one step forward, two steps back, three steps forward, this, torn, completely spiritually miserable, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know where everyone, all your listeners will be at spiritually, but a lot of guys, either it's a spiritual conviction, or some guys just will say, this is not who I want to be.
Hmm,
It might not be in overt spiritual language, or it may be where they go, I don't like this in my life.
right.
I don't like what it does to me. I don't like the way it invades my life and takes over. So like a lot of guys, but I was going to be, first of all, I was going to be an accountant, and then I went into I got a business degree, but then I met this amazing woman at UBC, University of British Columbia, and I'm going, you know what? She was going to be a teacher. I thought that's kind of cool. I wasn't one of these guys that had a lifelong what I was going to do. I keep unfolding into the next chapter, Mac. I keep saying now I still don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life, but I knew after a while I wasn't going to be an accountant, so maybe I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
So met this great girl at university, and actually her background was her dad looked at porn all the time, and she found his stash, and so when I told her about this, she didn't freak out.
Okay.
She didn't, could you? This is what's wrong with you. She kind of felt like doesn't every guy struggle with porn?
Hmm,
So that was not a bad first conversation to have her response. Now that's not every person is going to have that response. Not every, and I'll often talk to guys that I'm meeting, tell me what sort of conversations you had if you're married pre-marriage. Some guys didn't have any because they knew this was no go, right? So
right.
I,
And then
I yep,
question for you.
yeah.
Was that discussion like did you bring it up, or was it through premarital counseling that like that's where it came up, or how did that kind of conversation come up for you guys?
You know, I tend to be like many podcasters. I tend to be a bit of an oversharer, Mac. We were having this conversation in one of our recent groups,
Right.
and I just didn't want stuff to stay hidden,
Yeah,
right? And
sure.
I think I brought it up. Um, we only had one or two premarital counseling sessions, and the guy was like, "Well, considering couples I see, you guys are good to go." So he didn't, it didn't really come up per se in that way,
Okay.
but I was caught up in this. Okay, because my girlfriend at the time, soon to be fiance, didn't freak out. I'm going to be good to go, especially because we all know that when we get married,
Right.
it's gonna porn struggles we have because we'll have sex on tap, right? They'll right
Right.
pull the lever and we're good to go. And the reality is, like, most guys I talk to, it reemerges within 6 to 9 months
Yeah.
of their lives,
Clockwork.
right? Like clockwork. And you realize, how gone it, this actually isn't about sex. It's about an entirely different way of medicating one's life
Sure.
and running to those that brain buzz whenever we have an uncomfortable feeling
Yeah.
that we've just paired with feel bad, run to porn, feel bad, run to porn, feel stressed, run to porn, feel bored, run to porn. And just getting married didn't actually do anything. So didn't change anything. And so if you're a single guy and you're going, I just got to hold on until I'm married, I hate to tell you that, dude, you've got work to do on the front side of marriage because it's marriage isn't going to change anything. And that's hard for people because they've been pinning a lot of hopes on that. So,
Yeah.
um, so, So we moved to, taught high school for a few years. Then I did something really crazy. That unfolding thing I described where I just did the next thing. Moved down, we got involved in a church, and a guy who was a pastor say, Vern, you don't beat your wife. You've got some Bible skills. You've got some marriage skills. I need somebody to come on staff with me. And I couldn't find a teaching job at the time. And
Okay.
I said, fine, I'll come on staff with you to help you out in a pastoral role, you know. And before you know it, I'm in that for 5 years. And then there's just one crazy thing after another. Then we decided to move and plant a church
Okay.
down in this where I live right now. And so as a church planter, so you're thinking, okay, well, if you're not in the church world or you're not in, you're thinking, okay, well, obviously doing something where you're a professional Christian, that's obviously going to take care of your porn problem,
Ooh,
right?
okay. Yeah,
Well,
this is the next level of things you think is going to take care of it.
exactly. Oh, dude, that's gonna get it, knock it out of your system completely. Guess
Sure.
what?
Nope.
Nope. And so it did not do that. And all it did is it put me into a bit of a quandary because I had started to develop over a period of time what I call my perfect storm.
Mm,
If you ever have seen the movie with George
hmm.
Clooney, The Perfect Storm, they're out on a fishing boat and three different storm systems converge.
Good.
And,
Right.
and then they never make it back. But for me, the three storm systems were this. Number one, now we're going into the early 2000s now. Number one, I was speaking most every Sunday. I was substitute teaching high school. I was, so I was so busy with so many competing demands. 7 year mark, I burnt out.
Mm,
And I hit depression. I cried more. I, I, I ran into complete emotional wall in my
mm,
life, burnout. That's storm one. Storm two was a midlife crisis, turning into my 40s. Realized that at that time, when my dad turned 40, he left my mom, started
mm,
a series of affairs.
mm,
So that was interesting in terms of, and realized later on he had had a sexually compulsive life his whole life that he'd kept hidden. So that was interesting. So storm one was this whole burnout,
right.
having too many competing demands, not just being busy, too many competing demands. Two was the idea of midlife, where I didn't like the way my life was turning out. A lot of the carrots that I'd been chasing, or the rabbits I'd been chasing as a greyhound runner, um, you know, I I hadn't managed to catch them. And then the third one was a very simple one, working alone in an office with the advent of high-speed internet.
Mm,
So all of a sudden, peer-to-peer network, I'm downloading high speed, full length porn movies. And I mean, that's like the mother load, right?
right. Right. Right.
That's like, forget the days of Playboy Penthouse. This is high speed, bam, 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 And so I realize I am in serious trouble.
Mm,
Now, my wife is different than most, and she says, no, we're in trouble.
mm,
We need help. I
mm,
will be your partner. You have to take responsibility,
right.
but we need to get help. So we started driving down, and this is the first place of mentorship. I know that's themes we're exploring today. This is the first time that I had somebody who was ahead of me be, with some
Right.
knowledge and wisdom speak into my life. And this guy worked primarily with sexual addictions, and he began to fillet my life, so to speak. Say,
Yeah.
well, let's talk about you. I remember one of his very first questions, Mac, was, "Well, tell me about your mother."
Mm,
And I was like, "What do you want to talk about my mother for? Who
right.
wants to talk about their mothers? My mother's great. My mother was it was this defensive reaction.
Sure.
But now looking back, the absence that my mother was not able to play in my life, in one sense, created a Velcro in my life for something like porn. So that would be my first example of a mentor. So that started the process. Now, I am a really slow learner when it comes to recovery. I am the world's slowest learner. So so this was going back, and I'm not trying to sound like an old fart here, before there were virtually no recovery resources
Sure. Yeah.
around porn. There was
Right.
AA. In fact, I went to AA for an entire year, Thursday noon hour meetings. Alcohol wasn't my struggle, just to learn about recovery. And I
Wow.
sit in those meetings and listen to guys talk about their struggle with alcohol. And if it ever came to me, I'd just say, I'm Vern, I'm a recovering sinner, or I don't know, they would laugh at me and move on. Cause but I just, that was that was the closest thing I could find to, to a sense of guys with shared brokenness.
Sure.
So at that point, I did something really dumb. Well, not dumb. I started a group for guys. Now, because I'm an overshare, remember we started with that. Even though I was a pastor in the community, I got to the point where I didn't care anymore. So people started showing up to the group that I was leading to get help.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
so I was a very defective mentor, right? And I liken it. Well, I wasn't like I liken it to if you're going to climb Everest, which I don't ever plan on doing, but I do know there's a series of base camps,
Sure.
base camp one, base camp two, whatever they call them, and I would still be struggling and acting out on a semi-regular basis, but I couldn't find anything to get help. So I essentially said, well, I'm going to start something. So I would have like 8, 10, 12 guys. And at one point, and I would share when I was screwing up.
Sure.
And there was a few times where I says, guys, I think I got to stop because I'm not where I need to be. And they were like, dude, you can't stop doing this
Right.
because no matter where you are, you're ahead of us.
Sure.
We can't get 3 days or a week. So don't quit. And in fact, your struggles create a safe place for us. So don't so I did that for 10 years. For
Okay.
10 years, I led a recovery group, even though I was not walking what I would say in any kind of real sustained recovery.
Got it.
Now, remember I said I was the slowest guy in recovery?
Yeah.
So now, okay, and you're getting older, Vern. Okay. Now I'm in my 50s, Matt.
Okay.
And I would say it was in my 50s that I found what I describe as a tipping point, where for the first time, the idea of tipping point is all these little steps began to come together, and for the first time, really began to experience real sustained recovery, weeks, then months, then years. And the reason for that tipping point was this kind of, and again, I think it's different for different people, was kind of a combination of, for me, it was getting into a group of guys who most were all ahead of me.
Mm,
Now that was different, right, than what I had before.
right.
These were all guys who had longer sustained recovery. So it was like group mentoring. In addition to that, getting some coaching from two guys. First of all, Michael Leahy and Matt Dobshoot. So though both of those guys were not just recovery coaches, but also business coaches at some point. And so that was the second one. Podcasts for me became a real source of daily encouragement.
Mm,
So getting into I mean, I listen to a podcast every day.
yeah. Pretty similar.
So some of that combination, finally, all of those steps came together, and then I was experiencing a far more what I would call true recovery or sustained recovery. And then after that, then start working with Michael, working with Matt D, and then the training and podcast to be an effective coach and mentor. and then that moved into a bit of the coaching dynamic I'm at today. But I'm still got to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, Mac. But I'm still unfolding. I'm still pulling the string of the sweater. But thanks to God, thanks to the support of men around me, I am experiencing the freedom of wide open spaces when it comes to my life. So, anyways, probably more information than you need.
No, that was fantastic. And then so when you first like met Matt, so for the
Hmm.
audience, Matt Dobshoots,
Hmm.
he's the host of Porn Free Radio,
Yep.
which that was the first that was the first porn recovery podcast I started to listen to.
Yep.
And I actually met Vern through Matt Dobshoot's group, Recovered
Hmm.
Man,
I still
which
coach for some of his rev groups. Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of interesting that you mentioned that just because that's how we met. Vern, you started to take over some of his groups and
Hmm.
help with that. And then
Yep.
I I was moved from Matt's kind of the group he was running to your group. And
Hmm.
then that's how we started to meet. And then
Hmm.
now I'm in your recovery group that you run,
Right.
which is Band of Brothers.
Yep.
Um, that's fantastic. So did you like start and this is maybe more of a personal
Yeah.
curiosity question, but I
Sure.
think it ties in. But like with meeting Matt, like did you start to meet him through like listening to his podcast and then were you in one of his groups or like how can you explain that a little bit more?
It's a great question. I probably listened to the first 100 to 150 podcasts. So you do actually, it's really podcasting's a bit weird. You'll notice people really get to know you.
Yeah.
They develop an affinity. They feel like they know you simply by listening. If you listen to 100 plus podcasts, you learn a lot about a person. You develop a real affinity to them. Now, I had been in a group run by Michael Leahy through Bravehearts. So I had been in a
Bravehearts.
group, that was the group that I was kind of the newest guy in terms of length of sobriety.
Got it. Okay.
So by the time I got to Matt and then we struck up a relationship, I was already had enough traction and enough momentum that I think we moved almost immediately into uh, working together relationship and we started talking about I actually did a training how to be a coach through Michael Leahy, but it was Matt's the idea of using a podcast and just his business acumen to say, okay, I can do this. If I see a model of somebody else doing it,
Hmm.
it gives me the sense I can do that too. Not just with recovery, but with coaching, with
Yeah.
mentoring. Yeah.
And would you kind of say that mentoring coaching is like it's a part of like your recovery? Like it helps with your daily recovery journey?
Yeah, and I think my situation is a tad bit different in this way. First of all, my therapist was a coach in one
Okay.
sense. He's coaching me in things. A coach is there for somebody who knows things that you don't yet know,
Mm,
and has also got experience in areas where you haven't gone before or not fluent in. So my therapist helped me in emotional family of origin issues that I had never gone there before and had no fluency in. And he would ask me questions like a good coach does, more so actually than telling me things. He'd ask me good questions and I would go, okay, I never thought about that before. Or like example, my mother, I never thought that the role of my mother could have actually
right.
been significant. And
Right.
then when you read a book, some of my coaches, I'm gonna use the word coaches, are
Yeah.
not people I've met in person.
Mm,
So there's vicarious or impersonal coaches. Being a lifelong learner. So I would read two books that I read that were super helpful for me. The first one was Surfing for God.
yeah. That's what we
That,
someone in the group talked about that, I think, last week.
yeah, Michael Cusick. That book really helped me put together um, just a whole broader approach to strategy. But the one that I was going to reference in terms of the therapist was Jay Stringer's book, Unwanted.
Mm,
So those guys also can mentor you to some degree.
right.
You know, where I want to say I'm a little different. Like we've worked one on one together, you and me,
Yep.
right? Now, I did not work one on one with Matt um or Michael in the same way. But so I just want to, which
Yeah.
I think would have been helpful. At the time, I didn't get into it that way. But I also, maybe because I had been leading a group for 12 years. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Sure.
But I will say this though. When I was in a group of guys who were ahead of me, then what happened was I was learning from them. And these guys had some of these guys had been in, recovery 6 months, a year, two
Right.
years. So I am learning things like, well, how did they get there? What's their approach to boundaries? How are they creating safe environments? Even listening to their check-ins, I was learning stuff. And and if there ever was failures or falls, I was listening to the way they handled relapses. So
Mm,
I was getting mentored all along the way by these guys. Now, what most guys do, this is what most guys do, and I'm all for accountability. Most guys find a buddy that they're comfortable with,
right.
and they say, "Okay, you and me together, we're tight, right? Yeah, I can tell you everything," which means most everything. But and we're gonna hold each other. Here's the big word: accountable, and we're gonna do this thing. Yeah, let's do it. It's like Tough Mudder. We're gonna do this thing.
Right.
And you know what? And that's great. Peers are huge. But sometimes you're pooling two things.
Mm,
There's shared ignorance. You're pooling together your ignorance. You don't know what you don't know, right? Or you're just sharing together your failures. Oh, my week sucked. Oh man, I could. Oh, mine did too. Oh man, don't we both suck? Yeah. Oh, we'll do better next week. You got it. Thanks.
yeah. Yeah. I've been there before.
Right. And that's good in that it serves a certain purpose, but
Sure.
that's not what we're talking about. Helping somebody move forward by having people ahead of you.
Right. And then somebody that can help kind of provide you some structure,
Yep.
like a coach, right? Like
Sure.
write up the
Yeah.
play. Say, hey,
Yep.
we're gonna run this play,
Yep.
and this play is gonna work if you do, what I say.
Yeah.
You still got to do the play because you're the
Yeah.
player, but we're gonna write it up. I love that. That's a great analogy because I think we've been using this word mentorship, but it's morphed into like a coach,
Yeah.
and I like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I come from like a sports background as well. Like my
Sure.
dad was my coach for a while growing up as a
Okay.
kid, and um, he would always he always knew I could take it, so he would kind of make. Sometimes I'd be like the person that would be the example,
Right.
uh, and I think he did that just to show, hey, like my son's not gonna be given preferential treatment over all the other kids.
Hmm.
But I think that taught me something that
Yep.
if you get that feedback, and sometimes you're not gonna like it, sometimes you might kind of look inwardly on yourself and say, man, I'm not doing the best, or I screwed up. But if you have someone there that's your coach and that's like, hey, I'm doing this to help you.
Yep.
I'm doing this because I see the potential in you. Uh, I think that's like so necessary. And yeah, go ahead.
And you hit the nail on the head there because I think to have a good coachee or mentoree relationship, the best types are when the responsibility and the initiative doesn't lie with the coach or the mentor. It
Right,
lies on the person saying, I want you to help me. I want you, if you see something, call it out. And that's where I think some people go to a coach and go, "Oh, my coach wasn't very good. He didn't ask me the right questions, or
right,
or they didn't." And it's like, "No, dude, the initiative's on you. And if you're setting up all sorts of boundaries where you're not willing to have them say things to you, you know, it's on you, to be teachable, to be learnable, so learnable. There you go. So here's a good example. And as a coach, I often will, I can go as far, or a mentor, I can go as far as somebody's teachability. So here's just a silly example that happens time and time again. So a guy's got a smartphone, he's got his iPhone, and he puts on an app, he acts out with it, he takes the app off, and then he's good for a while. And then, so when we're talking, a guy says, "Oh, I had a red week, things didn't go well." And as a good coach, I'll say, "Well, tell me what happened."
Right.
And sometimes guys don't really want to say what happened, but I will drill in and say, "Well, tell me what happened. Tell me what went on. Tell me what happened. What were you looking at? What was, and usually it's right. So they got to push past their embarrassment or their, reticence on that. But sometimes I'll get guys that will put an app on, act out with it, take the app off. Put the app on, take the app off. No, put the
Mhm.
app on, act out, take the app off. And at some point, I'll say to them, "How's it?" It's kind of like, "Well, how's that working? Do you notice a pattern here? Do you notice that?" And the guys that are super teachable, they might after 3 or 4 times say, "Okay, damn it, that's it. I'm this pattern." And I'll say, "Okay, well, here's something you could do different."
Right.
As opposed to trying to convince the guy after 12 or 15 times, maybe this isn't working for him. "Oh, no, no, I need to be able to have access to unfiltered Facebook because I've got to, okay, well, let me know how that works for you." You see the diff you see the difference between those
Right.
two, where one guy wants to get the maximum results with the minimum sacrifice or changes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it,
it's
it
it's kind of almost like a quarterback, and they've thrown like 3 or 4 interceptions,
yeah,
and they're just bombing the pass down the field,
yes,
hoping for that Hail Mary.
yeah,
And then you're kind of like, hey, like, have you thought about maybe like running the ball?
checking it off to your running back, or maybe some of these little, try West Coast offense.
Yeah, maybe try like, something a little bit like less risky.
Yes,
Uh yeah, no, I love that. That's great because I think that helps, I think, for the audience too. It's not just about like finding a mentor, but it's also about like you yourself when you
yeah,
have that relationship, how can you like maximize,
yeah,
like how can I maximize my relationship with you when we're talking together, when we have this valuable time because I'm in your program. So,
hmm, yeah,
I'm looking to get something out of it, right?
yeah,
But a big part of that is like I'm still the one that's the quarterback. Like I'm still the one
that's
that's got
right.
the ball in my hands.
Yep,
And you're the coach. You're on the sideline. You've got the plays,
you're right.
but I've got to be able to talk to you, communicate with you. We've all seen probably, I'm trying to find a good example of maybe a quarterback that's not really that coachable, but there's always those moments like on
Yeah,
camera, right, where the
yeah,
quarterback and the coach are kind of arguing and
yep.
yelling. I think that happened with Russell Wilson one time at the Broncos. I'm trying to remember the game it was, but it
Let's
was
ride,
like,
let's ride, let's ride.
yeah, him
No,
and
let
Sean Payton did not like. There was a moment there. Maybe that's why he's not here anymore.
yeah,
But
exactly.
there was a moment like where you could just tell like Sean Payton was pissed,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Russell was kind of like, it was like a complete like disconnect
Yeah,
because Payton probably was like, hey, like we've got this play,
yeah.
and then maybe like let's say I'm like Russell Wilson, I might say, okay, Vern, like that sounds great, but
You just
I think I'm
checked
gonna
out of it. Yeah, yeah,
I think I'm gonna try something different that I think's
yeah,
gonna work. And
yeah.
then again, like, it's an interception or, we turn the ball over or something and you're like, hey, like, I gave you the play, man. Like
The only difference in that is you and me don't get paid 30, 40, 50 million a year.
that is true. That is true. But I love
Well,
that. Yeah,
let
that's a good segue. Yeah.
let me and let's put it this way. Let's just kind of lower the mentoring threshold for a second
Yeah.
to find somebody that is a Matt Dobschutz or Michael Leahy or somebody that, okay, that's what I want in a coach. You know what? Let's just use a different example. Let's just use a 12-step program.
Yeah.
If anyone's been to 12-step meetings, you're always told you need to do three things. Number one, come to meetings.
Right.
Number two, work the steps. And
Right.
number three, get a sponsor.
Right.
And if you're not doing those three things, you're not doing the 12 steps. Now, why I say that is 12 steps essentially is saying, what does it mean to get a sponsor? They just say, look around in the meeting, listen to the way people talk, and ask yourself, who is it that has more of a track record that would be willing, that I could learn from to take the next step or two?
Right.
You see that's lowering the threshold, and a sponsor is just somebody who's ahead of you.
Yeah.
It can be in a variety of settings, but the bottom line is you need to have somebody ahead of you.
Yeah. Great point. That's like a huge point. If there's any takeaways from this podcast, is like it's necessary because
Absolutely.
we've talked about it a bit. Like I did an interview with my little brother.
Hmm.
That's more about having that brotherhood, like that person's more
Sure.
like that peer, somebody
Yep.
that's like ready to go on the journey with you.
Yep.
That's more or less kind of in the same, same area of sobriety, all that stuff.
Yeah. And you can check in. You're feeling a
Right.
little bit wobbly today, and you saw this chick at the bank machine, and you're just going, "Oh man, I can't get her." Oh, you just rifle off a note to your buddy
Yeah,
as an example.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then like taking that aspect of it, but then also tying in, okay, you got your accountability partner, you got your buddy.
Yep.
Now you got to have a mentor. Like you got to have a coach. You got to have someone that's ahead of you
That's right.
that is going to give you a different perspective on things,
Right.
unlock the potential in you that you might not
Hmm.
even see in yourself.
Sure.
You might have this completely different perspective in your head of how your recovery is going to go, and then you get a coach, a mentor like you, and you can help unlock. Like I said, you helped inspire me to do this podcast.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have you as a coach or a mentor or didn't start Matt Dobschute's, Rev
Yep.
group,
Yep.
where would I be in my recovery journey? It'd probably look a lot different. I'd probably be still, doing like you were saying, kind of like the binge and purge cycle, because I
Hmm.
completely, agree with that and relate to it to where you do really well for a bit, you purge it all out, and then you binge, and
Yep.
it's this nasty cycle.
Oh,
So it
absolutely.
is
It's a
a part of
spin
breaking it.
cycle.
Yeah,
It's a
spin
spin cycle.
cycle.
And just to add to that three-dimensional, having somebody who's a buddy along with you, having somebody who's ahead of you, which is what we're talking about here today. But then the one thing that you're also doing through with your podcast, you don't have to do a podcast to do this one, is to find somebody who's struggling, who's not nearly where you
Ah,
are.
great. Yeah, great point.
And that is like full circle where now you're helping somebody that can't get a day or two free, or that's in marriage or something that you go, you know what? I may not be where I want to be, but I do have something I can give you, right? As
Yeah,
part of that. So yeah, those
I love
those
that.
three are huge. So well, here's a good example. A golfing example.
Okay.
Apparently that one of the things they'll do with golf, a golf pro will do, is if they feel like a person's swing is off, they will do something, make them do a golf swing in a completely different way
Okay.
to totally change their swing to try those patterns. As part of that, a coach will do something, I don't know, do a golf swing with just using one hand on the club, or do something so to because they will recognize there's something in your swing which is not giving you the results that you're looking for. Now, any golf pro here that's what listens to your thing might be pulling their hair out right now, go, you don't know what you're talking about, which I don't, but I've read it. Okay. So, and in the same way, we all have a golf swing when it comes to our recovery
Mm,
patterns.
mm,
And the question is, if your golf swing is not working, having somebody who's looking at your golf swing and say, okay, I've noticed every time you get stressed out, or every time you have a fight with your wife, or every time you hit Friday afternoon and are bored at work,
right.
this is what you do. That's your golf swing. Do you see you have a golf swing? And it's, you're only hitting the ball 10, into the sand trap every time. Or this is how you can change your golf swing. That's where a coach comes in.
Yeah, I love that. I might need some of that golf advice because I am not. I if any of my buddies are listening to this, which I think some of them do, we have this yearly tournament in our hometown
Okay. Yeah.
called the Masters tournament,
Yeah. Okay.
and I typically get last because I just don't golf that often,
Yeah.
and yeah, like kind of to go into the golf metaphor, like yeah, if you're not like practicing, you're not practicing your swing, you're
Yeah.
not getting that consistency in, and you just think you're going to go out and do well. So far, I've learned every year that that hasn't worked for me.
I'm
So
a I'm a I'm a I'm a weird golfer in this. I don't know. Somebody explain this. If I go out, if I haven't golfed all year, it's been a year or two. When I go out and golf the very first time,
yeah,
I actually do pretty good.
okay.
But there's something about the second time I go out that it all goes to you know what. It's just I can't hit the ball more than 10 feet. I don't know what it is. It's like I the first time there's some muscle memory that works,
Yeah.
but I start okay, the analogy is breaking down here, but but then I can't
No,
golf. Save my
well,
life.
it's almost kind of like the analogy is like sometimes like when you're doing something naturally
Yep.
and maybe you're not overthinking it, it's kind of like maybe capturing that energy. Like
Yep.
let's just say in recovery too, and we've talked about this, and I think I've talked about this in the podcast, but like I like love the active commitments part. I think that's been like a huge deal for
Yes.
me, like just
Yep.
really leaning into it, where we talk about like how are you doing with your relationships, how
Yep.
are you doing with your passions, how are you
Yep.
doing spiritually, and then how are
Hmm.
you doing physically, and how that ties into recovery.
Yeah.
But it's like leaning into like what naturally is working for you, like what are your natural passions, like what
Hmm.
natural relationships do you have, physical things that you naturally like to do, like do you naturally like to go to the gym or do you like to go on a run, do you like to go on a walk, like and then with spiritual, right? Like
Yeah.
naturally, like what brings God into your life.
Sure.
And it's kind of like capturing that, like almost like a golf swing, to where you're not overthinking it, you're not trying to over engineer it.
Yep.
You're literally just kind of getting to that spot where you're in that flow state. Because like I've had moments in golf too, like where I've just hit crazy putts, like
Mm.
30 feet putts, like just nuts things that happen naturally, or a really good drive, to where in my head I'm like, man, if I could just capture that and do it. And I guess that's golf, right? Is like that's the hard
Yeah.
part, because it's such a precise game.
Yeah.
But no, I love that analogy. So hopefully this year I do a little bit better in my golf tournament.
Do,
Thinking
do,
about
do they
this.
present the best guy with, do you get get the green jacket at the end?
Yeah, so get this. So the best person gets a jacket. So it's
Okay.
actually like looks just like the Masters jacket, and
Okay.
all the winners do a celebratory. It's the night before, because it's a 2 day thing. It's Saturday and Sunday, so it's 36
Okay.
holes total.
Oh,
But
wow.
they all do a, champions dinner at Applebee's.
Applebee's.
Yeah. And
Oh, that's interesting.
so get this though, the last place person carries a trophy as well. So I have it. It's we found this like shredded shoe on the course, and I don't you never know, like there's always like times like
Yeah.
where you're walking, you just see like one shoe and you're like,
Right.
did this person just disappear? Like
Right.
they just forgot their shoe and they're like, I'm just gonna keep walking. But there was this shredded shoe on the course that just, I think the lawnmower or whatever just went right over it.
Gone through it. Yeah.
And it hasn't gotten there yet, but people are kind of like, well, maybe you could like drink beer out of it.
Right.
We haven't
Okay.
got there yet. Like I
Yeah.
would have to totally just put this thing through like,
Yeah.
a dishwasher and desanitize it. But I do have the shoe,
Okay.
and yeah, this is maybe a commitment I'm making
Yeah.
on this podcast right now. That shoe, I'm gonna give it to somebody else.
Good.
That's gonna be the thing. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna get better. Now, am I gonna be
You're
like the
gonna grow.
best?
I guess.
Am I gonna be like Matt Dobbs shoots a Vern Tompke right off the bat?
Oh, yeah.
No, but can I get there someday?
Yeah.
I think so.
And what I like about what you're doing here, Mac, is I realized as well, and me and Matt Dobshoots have had this conversation. If you start out with the ready, aim, fire mentality, you'll never do anything.
Yeah, right.
The best is the enemy of the good. And I love, it's good business advice. The ready, fire, aim. Now I'm
What do you
all
find
for
around?
improving what I do, because I do some business coaching too, the Kaizen method of continual improvement. What are you doing that you can improve on? Okay, I'm all for that, but the idea of I got to do it perfectly. You know what? You'll never start. And you just get in the habit of that. So yeah, that's good. I'll have to maybe see if we can fit that in where every week in our group somebody gets the shoe or something. No, that probably would, for guys that already struggle with shame, that probably wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But I like that idea for your buddies. I can see Max going to go out and he's going to secretly hire a golf coach. And it's like it's like a movie montage, right? You see these montage where you're out there with your golf coach and you're working and working and working so that you don't get last place, and then something screws it up totally. And
Well, I
yeah,
think that's what happened last year. So I think like the first year I think I lost like it wasn't like super it wasn't like I was like that much worse.
yeah,
Like it was pretty close. I think that was like maybe 1 or 2 years in a row or whatever.
sure.
And then last year, like I was practicing more. I was playing with some
Okay.
people
Yeah,
and I was with a guy that typically is kind of like maybe middle of the pack.
right.
And sometimes I would like be a little bit better, like a few strokes better than him, or like right. Yeah. And then this tournament happens and like everyone just did so well. And then the one
Uh,
guy that actually was in last,
yeah,
they got his handicap wrong. So
okay.
like and
Oh
adjusted it
no.
right at the end, which again, it's fine.
Yeah,
This was kind of the drama. Like I saw on the scorecard, I was like, oh, like the last 18 hole, like you got to hit it over a lake, and it can be a really tricky hole because there's like another
yeah,
like little pond that
yeah,
could get you. So I like ended up just getting a bunch of strokes, but I was like, hey, I'm ahead enough to where I think I'll be okay. And then the handicap got adjusted to like my handicap because
yeah.
they're like, oh, it was unfair, and then I lost. I was like, oh my
Not
gosh, what the heck? What the heck is this?
not saying you're bitter, but you're still bringing it up a year later.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
I'm bringing it up and it's recorded. So just
That's
so in
right.
case the commissioner's listening to this, I
Yeah.
still have an issue. But this time, the goal, right, is not to leave it in the hands
Yes.
of the commissioner. It's just to take your recovery in your own hands, right?
And like they're saying, if you're depending on the refs to win the game, you are not, you make your own luck, Mac, right?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Vern, I think this was a great conversation. Um, I think, I did want to ask you about like advice for people. I feel like we covered that
Hmm.
pretty well.
Yep.
It seems like to me kind of the main concepts to wrap up like that
Yeah.
is to find somebody that's ahead of you,
Yep.
to find someone that's going to give you that feedback and know something that you don't know.
Hmm.
And then to understand that at the end of the day, though, you're still the player in the game.
Absolutely.
It's going to go as far as the work that you're going to put in. And
Yeah.
if you find that good coach, they're going to push you.
Yep.
But in the idea or the spirit of you improving and you reaching new heights that you never thought you would reach.
Well, and they're going to push you because you're already pushing yourself. And in my marriage, for example, my wife says she's not all freaking out about my recovery or when things don't always, she's saying the reason is, Vern, I know you are
Mm,
taking absolute responsibility for your recovery.
right.
And I can come alongside you now, but I don't have to be the one holding you up. And that's huge. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice too for like someone that's in a relationship
Yep.
is that, and I experienced that like in my previous marriage to where
Hmm.
it felt like sometimes that my partner was like, "Hey, I don't really want I'm rooting for you, but like I'm
Hmm.
not like your accountability partner."
Yep.
Like that's a lot of pressure on me.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's great as like when you outwardly go out and search for that type of coaching, that
Hmm.
mentorship,
Yep.
that can relieve a lot of that pressure from your partner who, is going to take that on naturally and
Sure.
feel like, hey, like I'm getting pulled into this thing that, you're working
Hey,
on. It's a we thing still, but like I think that can really affect the chemistry of a relationship as well.
absolutely. Yeah. And she's not having to say, I'm not having to push you. You're pushing yourself. You're not. And if guys are into minimizing or it's not that bad, or I'm going to fix this on my own, or you know what, I didn't make that phone call, or then guess who the weight feels like it's back on your partner. And they're going, I don't want to have the weight. I'm tired of, I got my own weight from my own life. I don't want to have to deal with the monkey on your back, right? To quote an old Bonnie Raitt song. So there you go.
Yeah, and then too, like if you notice, like if you've done, like, and this is for the audience, like if you've done mentorship or coaching before and you were kind of walking away feeling like you didn't get anything out of it, you might have been putting some of that weight on your coach
Yeah.
to where you're expecting them to kind of fix your problems or to get you to the next level where you're not actually doing it for you.
Yes.
Mm,
Yeah. Well, that's good.
yeah, I think that's, yeah. So, Vern, what a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this moment just to talk
Mm,
to you and to do this. A big, it's been an interesting month, because like it was a little over a year ago to when my divorce
hmm.
finalized, and
Yeah.
um, that was a very, heavy part of my life, and
Hmm.
just to like look and reflect to like where we're at now, and
Yeah.
and Easter Sunday's tomorrow,
Yeah.
the resurrection of Christ,
Yep.
and maybe I was thinking you could maybe lead us in a prayer,
I'd love to do that.
and
Yeah.
then we could end the podcast by just maybe just tell people where they can find you, like your
Hmm.
podcast and then your coaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to lead us in
Absolutely.
prayer, we could do that.
Sure. Oh, resurrected Lord, we want to thank you for the love that you've poured in our lives and the fact that our lives are a work of your grace. I ask that you would give each one listening to this just hope that you can step in and pull them out of the muck and the mire and set them on solid ground to a much, much better life, a life of freedom and a life of wide open spaces. So, Lord, would you take each guy listening to this and would you meet them as only you can? Thank you for all the good work you've done in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yeah, if anyone wants to connect with me, first of all, there is Finding Traction, which is all about recovery from porn. It's pretty much on all of the podcast apps. Finding Traction, a picture of a wheel with a bunch of studs on it.
I love that
Uh,
picture.
yeah, the
It's
second
great.
one is uh, other ways, simple ways, just to go to the website, which is Band of Brothers, plural, bandofbrothers.care.care, and more information on how you can connect with different things that I offer. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure, Mac. Thank you for. I love to see, as you said, even over this last year, the way that you are dealing with life. It's been a tough year, but I see you in a much lighter place, which is so encouraging to see, which is great.
Well, thank you, Vern. It helps having a great coach
Yeah,
to write up some of those plays. So
yeah.
appreciate you, Vern, and
Thanks,
everyone.
man.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. And like always, thank you, and keep fighting the good fight. Bye.